There are many theories about time travel that have been proposed by scientists, but can we really change the past? If you want to find out more, then this is the video for you, so make sure to watch until the end. Also, if you love science and technology, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our future videos. And with that being said, let's begin. First, we need to understand what time travel actually means. It's not just going back in time, it's also going forward in time. For example, if you were to travel at near light speed, time would pass slower for you than for someone who was standing still. This has been proven by experiments with atomic clocks. But traveling to the future isn't nearly as popular in science fiction as traveling to the past. And that's because changing the past is a lot more complicated. It is important to note that there is no scientific consensus on whether or not time travel to the past is possible. The idea of time travel is firmly in the realm of science fiction. However, some physicists believe that it may be possible under certain circumstances. So in this video, we will talk about the different theories that have been proposed by scientists. One of the most popular theories is the grandfather paradox. This paradox illustrates the logical problem with time travel to the past. It goes like this. Let's say that you travel back in time and kill your grandfather before your father was born. This would mean that your father would never have been born, which in turn means that you would never have been born either. But if you were never born, then how could you have traveled back in time to kill your grandfather in the first place? This paradox seems to suggest that time travel to the past is impossible. Otherwise, it would create all sorts of logical inconsistencies. However, some people argue that the grandfather paradox doesn't really prove anything. They say that it is possible to travel back in time and kill your grandfather without creating any sort of paradox. To see why, let's go back in time even further. Before you were born, your parents must have also been born. Your grandfather would have had to have been alive for this to have happened. And if you go back even further, eventually you will arrive at a point where everything that needs to happen has already taken place. In other words, you can't change the past because everything that was going to happen already did happen. This is often referred to as the fixed timeline theory of time travel. Another way to think about it is that time is like a river. You can swim around in it and explore different parts of it, but you can't change the flow of the river itself. If you try to change something in the past, it won't change because everything that was going to happen already did happen. This is what makes time travel to the past so difficult. If you go back in time, you can't do anything to change the past because everything that was going to happen already did happen. That being said, there are some theories that suggest that it might be possible to change the past under certain circumstances. One of these theories is the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. This theory suggests that every time a decision is made, the universe splits into multiple parallel universes. In one universe, one outcome of the decision occurs, and in another universe, another outcome occurs. This means that technically speaking, you could change the past by traveling to a parallel universe where things turned out differently. However, this theory is highly speculative, and there is no evidence to support it. Another theory that suggests that it might be possible to change the past is the transactional interpretation of quantum mechanics. This theory is a little more complicated, so we won't go into detail here. But basically it says that the past and the future are just as real as the present. This means that if you could somehow change the past, it wouldn't create any sort of paradox. Instead, it would simply create an alternate timeline where things turned out differently. Again, this is just a theory, and there is no evidence to support it. But what if we could change the past? Would this really be possible? The answer is yes and no. Yes, it would be possible to change the past by traveling to a parallel universe where things turned out differently. But in terms of changing your own past, that's where things get complicated. As we discussed earlier, everything that was going to happen already did happen. This means that if you go back in time, you can't do anything to change the past. Now what about traveling to the future? That's a lot easier. Traveling to the future is possible, and it's actually been proven by experiments with atomic clocks. As we mentioned earlier, time passes slower for someone who is moving at high speeds compared to someone who is standing still. This means that if you were to travel at near light speed, time would pass slower for you than for everyone else. This would allow you to travel to the future without actually moving very far. In other words, you could move really fast and age slower than everyone else. This has been proven by experiments with atomic clocks. When an atomic clock is moved, its rate changes due to the effects of special relativity. Specifically, the clock slows down when it is moved relative to an observer. This means that if you were to move really fast, time would pass slower for you than for someone who was standing still. Let's say you decided to take a trip to the future using this method. How long would you have to travel for 1 year to pass? Let's say 10 years on Earth. Well, the answer depends on how fast you travel. If you were to travel at 99% the speed of light, 1 year would be equivalent to 7 years on Earth. This means that if you traveled for 1 year at 99% the speed of light, you would have aged 1 year while 7 years would have passed on Earth. So if you wanted to travel to the future by 10 years, you would have to travel for 7 years at 99% the speed of light. Traveling to the future using this method is theoretically possible, but it is very difficult in practice. It would require a lot of energy to accelerate a person to near light speed. Additionally, the person would experience time dilation, which means that their heart would beat slower and their brain would function slower. This could potentially cause all sorts of physiological problems. So while traveling to the future is theoretically possible, it is very unlikely that it will ever happen in practice. So in conclusion, can we really change the past? No, not really. Traveling to the past is possible, but you can't change anything because everything that was going to happen already did happen. However, traveling to the future is possible. If you could travel at near light speed, time would pass slower for you than for everyone else. This means that if you were to travel for 1 year at 99% the speed of light, you would have aged 1 year while 7 years would have passed on Earth. So while traveling to the future is possible, it is very unlikely that it will ever happen in practice, because it would require a lot of energy and the person would experience time dilation, which could potentially cause all sorts of physiological problems. What do you think about time travel? Do you think it's possible? Let us know in the comments below. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our future videos. With that being said, we'll see you next time.